Hey, and welcome to your CAS overview. I visited a lot of the language classes, but for those of you who may be taking something where there's only one or two juniors, I may have missed your class. And so this short video can serve as that CAS overview that the language classes received. So hopefully right now you guys have received a couple messages or you have this worksheet. It's the one that says worksheet for CAS descriptions on ManageBack. And you also have this worksheet, the junior planning worksheet. This deals with all three strands: creativity, activity, and service on the front. And then on the reverse, it has the CAS project and some ideas to get you to brainstorm about that. Two due dates are going to be listed right here and right there on the back of that sheet, and so you guys can figure out exactly when I'm going to begin offering reviews and ideas for your CAS work. So let's jump right into it. The idea today is that you guys are going to understand CAS a little bit better. Hopefully you have a chance to workshop your experiences with some of your peers, and you can do that with those two worksheets I just mentioned. I'm going to show you exactly what ManageBack looks like with some of the class of 2020s work, and then if you need to, you can email me questions. Obviously you can't ask a question to a video. So what is CAS? How is it structured? There are the experiences, and that's going to be the aspects of creativity, activity, and service. And then there's a CAS project that you're going to do that'll span either 2 years, or you'll have a junior project and a senior project. Ideally, CAS is meant to enhance your interpersonal development. You're always going to be working with people, whether that's strictly one-on-one collaboration or within a group. The idea is that you're actually offering some opportunities for becoming a little bit more self-determined, setting goals, which is why I emphasize that so much in the first couple months of the junior year. We're obviously working with others, as I already said, and then even though there is some stress that is going to go along with CAS, and that really comes in the form of you logging your experiences, doing the hours, writing reflections, elements like that, that is supposed to offer a counterbalance to the academic rigor of the diploma program. So, what is creativity? Creativity is anything you do that engages the mind, really. Now, you're Homo sapiens, and so everything you do requires your brain. But this isn't meant for you to look to maybe some electives you're taking in school, and obviously that does not include any electives that are part of the IB program. So, journalism, orchestra, any of the arts, anything that you're doing there. This could be tutoring and teaching. You have to come up with ways in which you're kind of helping your fellow either students or students younger than you, developing programs like junior achievement, or really anytime you're using your brain. So bands, if you are helping to, as a captain on the lacrosse team, if you're helping to develop drills with the coach, etc., etc. Activity is the most self-explanatory, and people think of it typically as team sports, but you don't have to be doing team sports. Some people do taekwondo, they do they may run on their own. You can see that there are some listed here, some trail maintenance and shore cleanup. Maybe you're doing Potomac River Keepers, or you're doing something that's not just an Earth Day, in April, but you're kind of cleaning up your neighborhood and getting your heart rate up. Exercise classes. Ideally, this is the easiest one to work with in terms of objective goals. You have some sort of measurement. So if you're always looking at cross country, you may reduce your time, or in weightlifting, you may either increase your muscle mass, lift more weight toward the end of a season or sessions, etc. You don't have to have a wearable device. Most of you guys use your phones, and so if you do carry your phone with you, you can just clock it in terms of number of hours that you're dealing with. So I engaged in 5 hours of walking this week. The last one's going to be service, and we think of that here, and some past IB coordinators have talked about how that engages the spirit. So it's community service. It's anything where you're doing like tutoring. Obviously, that counts as service. If you are helping out your neighbor by picking up leaves, as long as you're not accepting money, right? No paid work. You're not proselytizing, or you're trying to actively, change someone's religious beliefs or anything like that. And you're not doing anything that deals with partisan politics, right? I call them the 4 Ps. You can't knock on doors for an independent candidate or a Democrat or a Republican. But if you're doing something like get out the vote, or trying to register people to vote, then that obviously would work. There are 4 types, and you can see them listed here. Direct is easy to understand. You're actually working with a specific person, so tutoring. Indirect, you may be packaging goods for military service members, or maybe for homeless. Advocacy, which is where you would be, doing some get out the vote type thing, advocating on behalf of somebody. And then also research would count as service. And so people in the past have made their CAS projects service oriented in the sense that they talk about women in STEM, and they created a blog about that, and so that every week one of the team members would post something to a blog, and it was made up of mostly young ladies. So she would write about somebody as obvious to us as Marie Curie, and then eventually started working within some of the more obscure scientific figures in the history of women in science, STEM, etc. Now the CAS project is pretty specific. It must be 24 hours total and you must deal with it for 2 months. It's meant to have some sort of deliverable. So some people will paint a mural or they'll make a series of coaching matrices. It's not meant for you to just kind of think on your own and work in a bubble. So you're hopefully working with two strands and you're working with somebody else. All reflections are going to deal with the 5 stages, and so we're going to go to those right now. And you can see this little image that IB has provided for us in the CAS workbooks. The 5 stages are right there. So you investigate, you think about what you're going to do, right? You prepare, you plan for what you're going to do. You act, or you have your action, and that's what you're doing. And then the reflection and demonstration are going to deal with learning outcomes, and that's where you're either writing or recording some sort of observation, some sort of consideration as to what you did. So IB thinks of these in these 2 circles, that you're always coming up with something to do, planning for what you're doing, maybe changing your approach to something, planning for the second time, third time, etc. And that this outer circle is the reflection and demonstration, again, of these 7 learning outcomes. So the 7 learning outcomes are right there. They're pretty self-explanatory. I see strengths and growths as actually part of all of the rest of the 6 here. But one of the things that a lot of students dislike about the beginning of CAS is that we ask them to set goals for themselves. Now, goals should be specific and measurable, attainable. Maybe you've heard of SMART goals or SMART-er goals. The acronym goes on to talk about being timely. Like, are you going to achieve these goals this year? When you talk about a challenge, don't just say, like, I want to challenge myself. Think specifically. So if you are playing, say, soccer or lacrosse, and you're not very good with your left foot for soccer, right? Maybe a specific challenge would be that you want to be more, you want to be able to kick a ball or shoot a goal or whatever with your left foot or your left hand in lacrosse. You want to be very specific. You might want to increase your field goal percentage in basketball. For initiation and planning, there's all sorts of different ways in which you can think about it. Maybe that means you have to get out of your bubble a little bit more. You have to make plans yourself, which is not something you're normally used to doing, and that's going to require short-term and long-term kind of planning issues. Please don't tell me that you just want to work with somebody. That's the definition of collaboration. Think about collaboration being something like, divergent thinking. You're going to think differently. You're going to offer counterclaims and ideas, other ways in which to work on a team. Or you may work more interdependently, that you're going to do some work to front load meetings. It may also be that you're dealing with active listening skills, which is a part of literacy, and kind of learning how to think a little bit differently by listening to what other people are saying and reacting to it, or responding rather. Perseverance and commitment is really a time-based idea, but maybe that requires you to dedicate a little bit more time, prioritize differently. And then global importance and ethical implications are the ones that are most difficult for students to wrap their heads around. So I'm going to deal with those on 2 separate slides right now. The idea is that you guys are going to reflect, and you're doing that before, during, and after all of your experiences. So here are some ideas. How are you planning your tutoring sessions? That's a before reflection. How did your tutoring sessions go? That would be during, it's the action. And then here, how did you demonstrate one of your chosen learning outcomes? That's after. So you're always going to be reflecting. And the best portfolios are going to have multiple written or recorded reflections, along with maybe some videos or some other evidence and pictures of what you're doing. So what's global importance? Well, tutoring was the example I used on the previous slide. If you take a look here, this comes from the UN's Global Issues webpage, and it's linked in this document right there. Well, apparently it is not. I'll fix that right now. But here are the first 6 as listed on the UN's website. So if you take a look, Africa, aging, AIDS, atomic energy, big data, children. If you're tutoring, your global issue is children. It may be access to education. It may be STEM education. It may be working with a peer as opposed to working with an adult. which oftentimes is a little bit easier for kids to deal with. And so you have to think about an issue that's happening in Columbia, South Carolina, and Columbia, the country, right? It should be affecting multiple countries around the world. So it doesn't just mean that you're going abroad to Denmark or France or China, where our school has gone in the past. It means that you are actually trying to think about something that a lot of different cultures and groups and communities are dealing with. So that could just be our Northern Virginia area, the Commonwealth of Virginia, the East Coast, the nation, North America, or the globe. Ethics of choices and actions is seen as just what are you doing that's engaging in the right thing or maybe even the wrong thing. So how are you making good choices, poor choices? How are you acting as a role model, maybe failing to act as a role model? So it's not always about success. And a link here, I've offered you these links in Manage Back, will take you to learning outcomes. And so as I was talking before, what I've tried to do is list specific challenges and goals and skills or in your goals. So here, for somebody who's working with art, they may be talking about shading or perspective or tonal scales. You want to be very specific in using the language of that specific activity or experience. Here, initiative and planning. These are the top 5 planning skills from a website called thebalance.com. What are you doing to analyze, to communicate, to make decisions, to offer leadership, to solve problems? Commitment and perseverance. That also deals with setbacks and resiliency. And a good place to look for goals and kind of think about goals is Fairfax County's Portrait of a Graduate, which you may or may not have heard of, but this is supposed to be something that a lot of Fairfax County teachers are working with. And since 2014, we've been talking about communication. And so here, there's a bunch of different learning and listening strategies. Collaboration. You can just steal these and kind of think about it in terms of what you are going to talk about in your role as a baseball player or your role as a theater team lead. Ethical and global citizen. Again, revise these, figure out what you want to do. Creative and critical thinking, and then goal-directed and resilient individual. So there's some tips that you guys can use and some resources that are available to you, and you can find all of these. My page looks a little bit different from yours in these links areas right here. And so the top 2 links are going to be the CAS handbook and Manage Back tips. And then I've also created a YouTube channel for you to be able to hey, this is Hendrik Booz. There's my annoying voice. You guys have a bunch of different videos that you can use if you don't understand exactly why you either received the designation or why I might have commented on your goals or your reflections or your descriptions. And so try to make these resources available to you guys. Before I show you Manage Back, the idea is that you guys have certain requirements your junior year. So to continue in the IB program, you have to have at least all 7 learning outcomes demonstrated, and that means that you've reflected on them. And again, you can do this in written or recorded fashion. And those are those reflections that I talked about. They're kind of like mini college essays. There's another video about those, so I'm not going to go into too much depth, but the idea is not that you're just telling me what you did. I trust you. Inherently, you guys are all, obviously ethical people for the most part. So what I want you to think about, though, is how that experience shaped you or changed the way you think or how you reacted to it. What setbacks did you deal with, and how did you overcome those obstacles? You also have to have finished your CAS project by early June for your junior year, and that's to earn the A in TOK, which I'll explain in a second. And then I'm not really concerned about hours because most of you are going to hit them. Try not to log 1 or 2. We call it nickel and diamond hours here or there. Try to group your hours. So if you're involved in like the tree sales for a sports team or an extracurricular activity, don't write that up as a separate experience. Actually, just make a reflection about that. So we want you to have 30 in creativity, 30 in activity, and 30 in service. So this is for the class of 2019. When they were juniors, 51% of them ended with a green flag or a golden trophy, even if they were really good, which means that they earned an A for TOK. Those same seniors, at the beginning of their year, only 20% of them, about 21% of them, earned the A because they just didn't continue working in September, maybe some through the summer, September, October. And so you're going to have certain deadlines. Not trying to stress you out, but I'm going to be offering you Tuesday tips, and I'm going to offer you all sorts of feedback on your Manage Back portfolio so that you're keeping up with this, because a lot of times you might be able to put this on the back burner and try to do it all at once. So what does that A mean? Well, TOK deals with primarily 2 things. The TOK essay, which you're going to write in your senior year, and then the TOK presentation, which you'll do once your junior year, and if you want to earn a higher grade, you can also do it during your senior year. From there, we also work with participation to try to be a little bit of a grade boost and to give you some feedback as to how much you're engaging in class. And then the real grade boost is really CAS or the EE. And so if you are earning something like, let's say you didn't do very well with your reflections, which are what we look at as the TOK or essay for your junior year. Let's say you earned a C on your reflections and you earned a B on your TOK presentation. You had a B for your participation your junior year. It's probably going to be somewhere between the C plus and the B minus range. If you meet all the deadlines for CAS and you meet all the deadlines for the EE, you could definitely make a better argument for a B minus or maybe even a B, depending on how strong your presentation was or your reflections may have started to become toward the end. So it's meant to be a boost for you more than anything else. Okay, so those grades are based on your written reflection, or in CAS on your written reflections, and then meetings with me second, third, and fourth quarter so that we're touching base, I get to know you, and you've completed your project. So ManageBack is a web portal, actually started in 2006 as a CAS project, and now it's a rather profitable company. It's the web portal where you do all of your work. You guys can see what it looks like. Here's kind of a visual. But instead of showing you these slides, I'm going to jump right to the Class of 2020's page. As I said before, there's all these links here on the side. What I'm looking for you to do by now is I want you to have 3 experiences logged by Thanksgiving. So this young lady, Elizabeth, has 4. I do a quick little check. They're all approved, and I'll show you why. She's got a good balance of hours, obviously a little bit more heavily focused on activity, but at least she has something for the rest of them. And this is where she's identified her learning outcomes. So I'm gonna ask her to start thinking about which one of these activities or experiences she can work with in terms of ethics of choices and actions. You can see, like I talked to you before, I offer you links, and I've been doing so throughout the first quarter for some of you, and when you guys add to things later on. So let's just look at the film club. Ideally, she could flesh this out a little bit more. It could be a little bit more of a description, because that's not the only thing that the film club does. But right here, she talks about she wants to work toward her goal in collaboration with working with students who have similar interests to myself. It's not the strongest of goals. I mean, ideally, she would want to work with students who have maybe interests that are not as similar as her own, but that's something there. Right? She has a goal of gaining experience with film. Again, it's a little vague, but it's a start, and I want you to think about kind of creating those goals. And if I go through here, and we'll pick just some other person. Let's go to somebody who is just crushing it right now, someone who's already started doing reflections. I go through here, fewer hours, which is fine for the time being, but she's actually already started, and hers are green, which means that she's already started writing reflections. And so if we take a look at those reflections up here, in mid-November, she was able to start writing. Now, they're not as long as maybe I would like them to be, and she's thinking a little bit more about her goals, but she hasn't explicitly mentioned all of her goals in these. I prefer that you don't try to crank a whole bunch out in one day, that you're doing them gradually, and so that's why I try to offer you guys some feedback there. Pretty simple, right? This one looks a little bit different, a little bit better description than Elizabeth's. My goal is to get better. Well, let's think about some of those specific dance moves. My goal is to go to the class consistently. I would hope that once you guys commit to something, you can do that. So you're going to learn how to create better goals and maybe more specific goals over the course of your junior year. But this is what somebody's portfolio should look like. So what you're going to find is when you first log on to ManageBack, there's a little video. And this video just indicates to me that you haven't either started uploading anything or haven't started logging. It's a minute-long video. You watch that, and right over here you start adding your CAS experiences. So this goes back to that worksheet. This worksheet is almost verbatim, or it replicates verbatim what all of the boxes that you have to click are. So you can see you need a supervisor, you need a start date and end date. And that start date can be anything as early as the first day of school, or and as late as early June of your junior year. If you know you're going to continue it into your senior year, by all means, you can go ahead and do that. So I have a drop-down menu right here, supervisor emails. Here's your description and goals. Here are the 7 learning outcomes, and so I'd like you to kind of limit that to 2 to 3, because I'm going to expect a reflection for every single goal that you set, every single learning outcome. So if you set 3 learning outcomes, I'm going to expect 3 reflections. That's why I'm not really as concerned about the hours. I'm more concerned, again, about those learning outcomes. Okay, so your first deadline is listed on the back of that worksheet. You guys can also find an example, exemplar description and goals here, and I've highlighted specifically where those goals are for you guys to kind of figure out exactly what it is that you need to do. You can always come see me in E101, and I hope this video was helpful to you.